The Seychelles are a small archipelago of African islands, located in the western portion of the Indian Ocean, northeast from Madagascar's northern tip. This archipelago is home to a vast variety of plants and animals, many of which are endemic and can be found only in protected areas. Among the 115 islands that make up the Seychelles, a small atoll sticks out, Aldabra, a place of invaluable ecological importance. Aldabra is the second largest atoll on Earth, and is home to a huge number of living forms, both marine and terrestrial, and both living and extinct. The geologic history of Aldabra is a long and complicated story that shows us just how life can be fragile, but at the same time, incredibly resilient. Welcome to Aldabra. The history of Aldabra's coralline atoll starts in the present-day Western Indian Ocean, between 25 and 20 million years ago. In a region of the lithosphere north of Madagascar, the mantle, initially exposed to temperatures and pressures that would keep it in a solid state, finds itself suddenly free of the weight of the overlying crust. The high temperatures induce its rocks to partially melt. A hotspot is born. In fact, the melting of the mantle generates hot plumes that rush to the crust until they burst out, causing great submarine eruptions. The quantity of lava expelled is remarkable, and it builds up, creating huge volcanoes that rise above the sea level, so forming volcanic islands like the Aeolian or Hawaiian Islands. Thanks to the tropical climate and the heat generated by the intense volcanic activity, life starts to colonize the waters around these volcanic islands. A ring of coral reefs is born. After a few million years from this event, the African plate continues its slow but relentless movement towards Europe. Just like what happened in the Hawaiian Islands, as the plate moves, the hotspot remains fixed, so the volcanoes, previously fed by that source, become extinct. This is how the Comoro Islands were born. This chain of underwater volcanoes testifies the migration of the African plate over the hotspot. Aldabra's cold and inactive volcanoes instead are slowly eroded away on the surface. Furthermore, their high density causes them to sink underwater, a phenomenon known as subsidence. This process goes on for millions of years, up until about 500,000 years ago, where once there was a group of volcanic islands, now there lies a great lagoon, still surrounded by a ring of coral reefs, the Aldabra Atoll. 500,000 years ago, Aldabra was dominated by a 20-meter deep lagoon. It was inhabited by mollusks, mainly bivalves who lived under the sediment, mainly made up of shell fragments and particles, derived from the precipitation of the carbonate dissolved into the water. In these waters, carnivorous gastropods of the family Naticidae, which made holes through the shells of other mollusks, were the most common predators. This ancient lagoon was a calm environment, subject only to the weak actions of the waves and the tides, that enabled the bottom to be well oxygenated and habitable. The occasional tides allowed the immersion of some portions of the lagoon, where more sheltered and shallow habitats could form, colonized at the surface by mangroves. A factor that influenced Aldabra's ecological balance was the alternation of warm and cold periods during the course of the Pleistocene. A sudden decrease of the sea levels, maybe caused by the beginning of a glacial period, caused another immersion of the lagoon, and the creation of a large island, whose area would have been around 20 square kilometers. It has been calculated that the island could have had an elevation of around 2 meters from the sea level. Along the coast, the limestone platform that was previously at the bottom of the lagoon was now exposed, thus it was subjected to the action of wind and rain that dried and cracked the surface, developing a karst landscape with pits and holes. On these beaches, many species of seabirds found food and shelter. On this island there were shearwaters of the genus Puffinus, other petrels, including the extinct and endemic Pterodroma curodae, and seagulls of the genus Larus. While flying along the coast, these seabirds often released excrement that permeated the eroded rock, causing its cementification in subaerial environments. The inner portions of the island were well vegetated and primarily dominated by herbaceous plants that gave shelter to terrestrial gastropods belonging to the genus Tropidophora. In the westernmost part of the island, the landscape was dominated by large sandy dunes with seasonal freshwater lakes. These environments were teeming with life. A typical inhabitant was the Madagascar pond heron, a species of heron that now inhabits the wetlands of Madagascar and the Comoros. The endemic flightless subspecies of the white-throated rail was already present. The ducks that colonized the island over the millennia gave rise to an endemic but now extinct species, Aldabranus cabri, an exclusively terrestrial duck. Birds of prey soared in the skies and probably nested on the island. With daylight, harriers of the genus Cycus would prowl the skies, while by night, barn owls will take their place. Passerines also reached the island, with an endemic member of the Malagasy genus, the Aldabra fodi. The recently extinct Aldabra brush warbler also reached the island. Hidden in the grass and between the rocks, there were also many squamates, like an extinct member of the genus Trachylepis, an as yet undescribed iguana from the genus Aplurus, the endemic Cryptobrephilus aldabrae, and the native day gecko Phelsuma botti. In the grasslands, the herbivorous species that still dominates the islands was already present, the Aldabra giant tortoise. With a carapace length of 122 centimeters and a weight of 250 kilograms, Aldabra chelis is one of the largest tortoises alive today. This tortoise was and is the largest land animal on Aldabra, and most importantly, it is a keystone species, given that its presence influences the distribution of the grasslands on the island. Mammals also arrived in the form of bats, with at least 2 endemic species, the Aldabra flying fox and Paulian's trident bat. Today, the vast majority of terrestrial animals present on the island are related to species from Madagascar, that they arrived on the island via rafting from Madagascar. This ecosystem survived undisturbed for hundreds of thousands of years, until the sea level rose again, submerging the island. Some species like the pond heron and the duck Aldabranus cabri vanished from the island. Others instead took refuge on the smaller islets that were still above the water. This new increase in sea levels gave rise to a new lagoon, around 2 meters deep, and characterized by calm waters with a fine calcarenite bed, where red algae were common. In this habitat, corals were rare and mollusks only lived in the rigid portions of the seabed. Later, around 138,000 years ago, another increase in sea levels made the water rise by another 10 meters. In this new habitat, a great coral reef was born, teeming with corals, algae and mollusks. This environment remained unchanged for at least 20,000 years, until the last glaciation started, the Voom glaciation. The sea level dropped again, but this time by 120 meters. This decrease though was gradual, and left as a testimony to its passage a sequence of terraces around the islands. What was previously one large environment now appeared as a series of rocky islands spanning at least 400 square kilometers. In these new territories, the vegetation was much more diverse. Soils able to sustain bushes formed, with sparse grasslands on which it frequently rained. In this new habitat, terrestrial gastropods became more and more diversified, adapting to the many different species of plants that were now present. Squamates took over the islands, becoming more numerous and diversified. Skinks were abundant, with genera like Trachylepis and Chelotis, as well as geckos of the genera Geckolepis, Paridura, and Phelsuma. Aldabra chelis also recolonized the islands. It is thought, in fact, that it recolonized Aldabra at least 3 separate times, from Madagascar or from neighboring volcanic islands. A new species also appeared, the dwarf crocodile Aldabracampsis dilophus, which became one of the dominant predators of the islands. It was about 2 meters long and was characterized by crests similar to those of the African dwarf crocodile. Among ground birds, only the rail, fody and brush warbler survived, while the skies were still dominated by harriers and barn owls. Giant crocodiles also appeared. They were so large that they would prey even on the giant tortoises. Though initially identified as Nile crocodiles, new molecular studies suggest that these were actually saltwater crocodiles, Crocodylus porosus, meaning this species once ranged across the entire Indian Ocean. These environments lasted long, up until about 11,000 years ago, when the beginning of the present interglacial period arrived, and the sea level rose again by 110 meters, thus reaching its modern heights. In the span of a few hundreds of thousands of years, the Aldabra atoll was subject to a great number of changes, alternating new ecosystems and new species. Today, the Aldabra Islands are a very important nature reserve, where living species like Aldabra chelis and Rheolimnus are preserved, and where the fossilized remains of all those species which alternated on the islands, now preserved in the rocks, can be found. In fact, rocks are not just a useful material for building roads and houses. they are also essential to discover ancient life forms and what occurred on our planet when we still weren't here. Every rock tells a story, and geologists and paleontologists have the opportunity to read it and spread the knowledge to the rest of the world, which can learn a great deal from it. Nothing is eternal on the Earth. The climate has changed in the past and will continue changing in the future, so destabilizing the balance that we are used to. The climate is changing right now, and it's natural that this happens. What isn't natural is the rate at which it is doing so. Climatic cycles that normally happen over the span of tens of hundreds of thousands of years are now happening in just a few centuries. The permanent ice caps and glaciers are slowly melting, and temperatures at the poles are higher every year, even in the winter. The waters are polluted, many species go extinct every year, and nobody takes their place. A drastic climatic variation can't do anything but make things worse. We are in the middle of the 6th mass extinction. But this time, it isn't a meteorite that is threatening us, but a species that has called itself Homo sapiens. Great, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please press like, and if you want to sustain us and our work, please subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon so you don't miss any of our videos. A big thank you to the team members Fabio Mongiovi, Mattia, Yuri, Messina, Valerio, Mariani, and naturally to our dear Iofrida. And as always, this video has been approved by good old Lambeosaurus Lambe.